Gaudete, gaudete, Christus es natus, ex Maria Virgine gaudete.
Welcome to the Rediscovery channel. This is a channel where I, Ivar Kovac, and my good friends Stilgar and Great Pharaoh take turns coming up with topics from history that the other person usually does not know about and often hasn't heard about. So today, it is just myself and Stilgar. But what I would like to do is ask Stilgar, have you heard of the Praetorian Guard?
The Praetorian Guard.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing this is a Roman thing.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yep.
So I think it's the guard of the emperor. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. Yeah, and I think they use lances or spears. I think that's about as much as I know, and I'm guessing they've been inspired by the Greeks. I don't know if that's right or not, but
well, not really inspired by the Greeks. I mean, the Roman soldiers throughout most of their history, they usually were equipped with short weapons as well as long weapons, or at least to my knowledge, that's the case. They're typically depicted that way. So the Praetorian Guard, yes, you're right. It was actually created as a special unit to protect the emperor. So, but then, of course, over time, they began to act more independently and take matters in their own hands. So let's start. I'll go ahead and start us off with the timeline.
Yeah.
So the Praetorian Guard operated from 27 BC to 312 AD. And the first Praetorian Guard was formed by Octavius Augustus in 27 BC. And as you probably know, Octavius Augustus was the first Roman emperor. He was also the emperor at the time that Jesus was born. And he's the emperor that brought Egypt into the Roman Empire. Of course, some people, they think Julius Caesar is the first Roman emperor, but he never achieved that status because he was stabbed to death before he could actually become the emperor. So at any rate, Octavius Augustus lived from 63 BC to 14 AD, and he ruled from 27 BC to 14 AD. And before he even came to power, it was already common for Roman generals to create their own kind of elite guard, like the high-ranking generals. And this guard would be called the Cohors Praetoria. And Octavius, he decided, now that I'm emperor, there should be an elite guard for the emperor, which would be more powerful than any of the regular Roman units, like the field units. So they were supposed to be elite soldiers, and their only purpose, or their main driving purpose, is to keep the emperor safe and answer directly to him. So throughout most of their history, the Praetorians would protect the emperor, but they're not just going to sit in Rome all the time. When the emperor goes to battle, they would go with him. And the original Praetorian Guard was made up of 9 cohorts, and cohort is usually 1,000 men. So the average total for the average total amount of Praetorians would usually be around 9,000 men. At one point, they had 1,500 men in each cohort, and that was like the high watermark. And then I want to talk about the ranks of the Praetorians and their titles. So the lowest rank, and I may not pronounce these perfectly. The lowest rank was the Miles or Miles, spelled Miles. And those guys are the regular soldiers. And then the immunes, which is the next rank. And after 5 years, these guys who are immunes could be promoted to the equity singularis, which is a cavalry branch. Or they could become speculatores, which means special agents. Then the next rank up is principales, and these guys are legionary administrators. So I assume that the principales would be the people that are in charge of the cohorts of about 1,000 men each. Then after that, the next rank is evocati, which you could join this rank after 16 years of good service. So you could retire, or you could potentially join the evocati, and they were kind of an honorary unit. And then the next rank is centurions. After that, tribunes, and the tribunes usually come from kind of the upper class, and these guys would be, these guys would be the commanders of the cohorts. My bad, not the principales. It would be the tribunes. And then next is procurators, and then the highest rank is a prefect, and usually there will just be one prefect, and he's going to be in charge of the entire Praetorian Guard, just underneath the emperor. Some of the other functions they would engage in, they would also fight fires in Rome. And actually there was a regular firefighting force in Rome. They were called the Vigiles, but they would be assisted by the Praetorians at times, because sometimes the fires might be too much for the Vigiles to handle as they were, or also the emperor kind of had an ulterior motive to send the Praetorians, because by doing so, it would look like the emperor is getting personally involved and actually cares about what's happening to the regular people. Also, they would provide crowd control during the Roman games. So I guess if you got too rowdy, you might end up on the receiving end of the Praetorians. They could potentially stop a riot. And sometimes they might even participate in the games. There was a sea battle hosted by the Emperor Claudius in AD 52. Of course, it's not a real sea battle. It occurred on land. And they had 19,000 men and about 100 boats in a fake naval battle on the Fucine Lake. And most of the participants were prisoners and slaves, but the Praetorians also got involved, and they would kill some of these guys too. So when Octavius was there, he was the first emperor, and he didn't want to look like an absolute dictator, even though he was pretty close to that in function, at least. He doesn't want to look like a totalitarian. So he doesn't keep all of the Praetorians inside of Rome. He would only have about three cohorts at a time on active duty inside of the city, and the rest
out of how many again?
Out of 9.
9, okay.
So it'd only allow about 3 into the city at a time, and mostly they would be inconspicuous, or they'd try to be. In general, Praetorians, they get more elaborate armor than a regular soldier would have. And at the time of their inception, they would have round shields, whereas the regular legionnaires, they would have this kind of rectangular shields. And of course, the reason that the regular legionnaires had these square shields is because when they were moving towards enemy lines and enemy cities, the guys around the edge would put their shields into a wall, and then the guys in the center would put their shields overhead. And I believe they called it the testudo formation. It basically means turtle. And the idea is that it would be a shell, and they would absorb all the arrow fire as they go. Very tough formation, but the Praetorians had round shields, like oval shaped. And the Praetorians they were paid better than regular soldiers, and they didn't have to serve as long before they could retire. So Praetorians only had to serve 16 years, whereas regulars had to serve 25. And then when the Praetorian soldier retires, he's given immunity from taxes. So you can pretty much just chill at that point. And of course, you don't have to retire after 16 years. You have the option of joining the evocati, but I guess most of them would retire, because why not? So moving right along, after the death of Octavius, the Praetorian prefect, his name was Lucius Aelius Sejanus. So the Sejanus, he convinces the next emperor, Tiberius, to allow him to move all of the cohorts into Rome. And ostensibly, this is so that the emperor can make better use of them. They can respond more quickly. They can be more useful to the emperor. And they construct the Castra Praetorium, which means literally camp of the Praetorians, just outside of Rome. So I suppose right outside the walls. And then Sejanus was prefect from 14 AD to 31, and he was kind of ambitious and worked to secure power for himself, basically. He pretended as though he was very loyal to the emperor, but he's also a suspect in the murder of the emperor's son, Drusus. And at any rate, he was not sad when Drusus died, because the emperor didn't have a biological heir, or at least a legitimate biological heir. In 31 AD, well, as far as feigning his loyalty goes, he got very close to the emperor. At one point, he saved the emperor from, I think it was a fire or a collapse. He protected the emperor with his own body. However, he had his own interest in attaining power and engaged in some conspiracies. And so in 31 AD, he was executed by Tiberius. And the Praetorians, even though their leader was trying to kind of usurp the throne, the Praetorians nonetheless remained loyal to the emperor. However, while this was going on, they got a taste of power, like they understood how much power they had and what they could do. So over time, the Praetorians will assassinate emperors as well as appoint and depose them. So I got a list of emperors that they assassinated and the dates that they were killed. So they murdered Caligula in 41 AD. Galba.
Oh, so sad.
I know, right? Some of them.
Great loss for mankind. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it could have happened to a nicer guy, right?
Yeah.
But some of them were probably nicer guys. So Caligula, not much of a loss, okay? But then Galba in 69 AD, Vitellius in 69 AD. So that's two guys in 1 year. Pertinax in 193, Elagabalus in 222, Albinus in 238, Pupienus in 238. That's two guys in 1 year. Aurelian in 275, Probus in 282. And in this list, I didn't include emperors that were specifically murdered by the Praetorian prefect, because the guards themselves may or may not have been involved in that. Probably weren't consensus actions as far as the general.
So how did they decide who to take care of, and why did the emperor not see this coming?
So as far as what the pattern is to their killing, I don't know. I have to read about each of these guys individually, because
were they controlled by the deep state, by big pharma and the military industrial complex, or?
Well, I think the Praetorians were kind of like the deep state of Rome, where if they didn't like the emperor, then they might just get rid of him. And I have a story about that in particular, because there's one story that I wanted to share about one of those incidences. But I just want to mention first that some Praetorian prefects actually used their power to make themselves emperors. So some of this stuff was just raw ambition. So Titus, who became emperor in 79 AD, was a Praetorian prefect. Macrinus in 217, and Philip in 244. Only three to my knowledge. And now what I want to do is talk about a guy named Didius Julianus, who was somebody that the Praetorian Guard set up as emperor. So Didius Julianus was born in 133 AD, and he died in 193. He was born to a senatorian family. Like, I believe the Roman senators, they still persisted as an institution, well after there were emperors and everything, but they didn't really have the same, they didn't really have the same level of power. And a lot of them would come from kind of upper class backgrounds. So that's where this guy comes from. And he was born in a place called Mediolanum. And he had a long political career, which lasted over 15 years. And to my knowledge, he never served as a soldier or fought in any actual wars. But he served as a governor. He served as governor in Gallia Belgica and was a consul with Pertinax. He also served as governor of Illyricum, Germania Inferior, Bithynia, and Africa. When we say Africa, we mean the Roman province of Africa, not the continent. Although the Roman province was in the continent. So
Northern Africa, I guess. So
yeah, I think it actually overlaps most closely with the modern country of Tunisia.
Mm.
I think Carthage fell into the province of Africa. I'll mention in the slideshow.
I think Carthage is more to the west. It's
Carthage is in the center. It's in the
Isn't it like Morocco or?
It's in Tunisia today. The ruins of Carthage are in Tunisia. I think close to Tunis. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think we talked about it was destroyed by Muslims during the conquest of the Maghreb. Like, first they surrendered and they left the city intact, but then later when they rebelled, the Muslims just trashed everything. And I think they silted up, they threw dirt in the harbor. They turned it into a irrelevant place for the most part. But yeah, that of course comes later. So basically this guy, he had a lot of important postings over his career. And then he went back to Rome in 193 after the Emperor Pertinax was murdered by the Praetorian Guard. I don't know why they killed him. Maybe I can look up what their excuse was in the slide and put something in the slideshow. But what happens is after they kill him, there are different guys that want to become emperor. So Didius, when he finds out about it, he goes straight to the Castra Praetorium to bid for the throne. Like, he wants to pay them to make him the next emperor. And the Praetorian prefect is already inside of the Castra Praetorium, offering bribes to the Praetorians, to his soldiers. So he's already bidding for the throne. And Didius Julianus can't come in, but he stands outside and starts shouting offers, from the ground up to the wall. And ultimately, he offers 25,000 sesterces to each Praetorian soldier, to each man. So he outbids Flavius Sulpicianus, the prefect of the Praetorians, and they decide to give this guy the throne. So he's proclaimed as emperor. However, he only gets to be emperor for 66 days before being killed and replaced by Septimus Severus. And what happens here is he doesn't pay the Praetorians in a timely fashion, so they just don't bother to defend him when the regular Roman soldiers come to kind of depose him and put the person that they want on the throne. So he bribed them to give him the throne, but then he wasn't able to hold on to it because he didn't pay him in a timely enough fashion. I heard another story about this. I'm not sure if it's true, and I can't remember exactly where I heard it. But supposedly the Praetorians during this period were kind of short on field experience, and they actually were not as good as the regular legions that were deployed, so they didn't think it was worth it to fight for this guy. Or that could have been actually another incident.
Why were they attacking him? Because he was trying to tax the crap out of the people in order to pay the Praetorians, or
no, just the military, the regular military. They didn't agree to it, and he only bribed the Praetorians. So the regular soldiers decided we don't want this guy, and they took him out. Like, we never agreed to this. So, and the Praetorians, they weren't that motivated to defend him because they still didn't get their 25,000 sesterces yet. Yeah, my guess is he probably didn't have the money at the time, and his plan was probably to tax the dickens out of the regular people to the point where he
Oh,
could
I would
pay.
assume so because 25K per soldier per Praetorian, and then you have what, 9,000 of them at least.
Yeah.
It sounds like a lot of money. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course the money wasn't there by the time the regular army decided to object. So the
Yeah.
Praetorians were like, "Forget this."
What
It's
a
not.
mess. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Although
much.
I guess I can understand why they wanted this Praetorian Guard, because I was looking up Spartacus, but he attacked Rome before they had a Praetorian Guard. So yeah.
Yeah, I think the Spartacus rebellion was during the time of the Roman Republic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was
Slave
like
revolt.
50 years before, give or take, before they started the Praetorian Guards. So
Also, I imagine that the murder of Julius Caesar had something to do with Octavius choosing to protect himself with soldiers, inside of the city.
Yeah.
Because even if, and after Julius Caesar was killed, he didn't come straight to the throne. The Romans had a civil war. Like so Octavius Augustus was probably trying to not just ensure that the emperor was safe, but that there wouldn't be problems after he died either. There'd be something to provide order. So I guess one way you could say
Yeah, but I mean that's the whole discussion. Maybe we can have it afterwards. Like who controls those that are supposed to control everybody else, right?
right.
Like there's there's like no checks and balances for these Praetorian Guards, because they are like basically the ones in the end that determine everything, because there's nobody else to oppose them.
So the Praetorians, they didn't really get into politics and so much. Like after they would replace the emperor, then they usually would kind of stay out of politics. They wouldn't be like, "Hey, make this rule, make that rule." But if the new emperor, they don't like him, they might kill him. Because, like I said, there were a couple times where they killed 2 emperors in a year.
Yeah.
So they would do that, but then other than that, they would kind of stay out of politics. Of course, killing the emperor is going to be for political reasons. But the other thing is, the emperor could disband the Praetorians and replace them at any time. He could change the leadership, and sometimes that would be done. But ultimately, what happens is Constantine disbands them permanently forever. So in 312 AD, after the Battle of Milvian Bridge, which was that battle where Constantine had the cross put on the shields of his soldiers, the Praetorians, they had chosen to fight on the other side, like Constantine's enemy. So they were with Maxentius. And so Constantine just decided they were no longer necessary. Like, why have a Praetorian Guard? It's more trouble than it's worth. So he disbanded them forever, and he tore down the Castra Praetoria. And that was the end of the Praetorian Guards. So there's no Praetorian Guards during the Byzantine period that comes later.
Well, the Byzantines had, like Harald Hardrada, like the last Viking warrior king.
Yeah.
He was part of an elite guard as well, but I forgot the name of them, to be honest.
The Varangian Guard.
Yes, the Varangians.
Yeah. I actually don't know when exactly or who started the custom of recruiting the Varangians. That would be
but they weren't as many, and they weren't as organized, and I think their sole duty was to protect the emperor, and it wasn't. Yeah, they weren't like ranked. They did fight in battles as well, but I think Anyway, yeah.
Were they used to protect Constantinople, or were they deployed to
They
defend?
were deployed for sure. Yeah, they
I think
were.
they were more like mercenaries just to bolster the defense.
Yeah,
They probably had more in common with.
which might be a way to have more control over them versus like if you have people that are like born into it or like they're from the region, like they would this would might be a way to control them better, to have mercenaries um that way.
The
So
Romans, they used to have, in addition to the regular legions, they had auxiliaries, and the auxiliary legions would be people that were not citizens of the empire. They might be subjects, but not citizens. So, like, they might raise an army of Berbers, but then they would
yeah.
deploy them on the other side of the empire, and so on and so forth. And
Yeah, I know a lot
joining,
of Dutch people from the Germans from this area were also deployed by the Romans because of their ability to ride horses across water. So they would be able to swim while sitting on the horse, apparently. And that was like nobody else could do that. And that was like a tactical advantage. Anyway, I think we're probably drifting off. Sorry about that.
yeah, no,
You go back. Sorry, Ivor. Yeah.
it's cool. Actually, that's all I had about the Praetorians. It's kind of a
Oh, okay.
smaller topic today. But
Yeah, that's cool. I really like their battle tactics. I guess that's why I was hinting towards the Greeks, because they also had this turtle shell kind of approach with their phalanx, I think they're called.
Yeah, it's a phalanx where the Greeks had round shields, and then they had like the
Yeah,
long spears.
yeah, but they would create this formation where it's basically one, and maybe you can include some pictures in your slides, but it's basically one big turtle shell, and that's how they would be able to avoid getting pelted by arrows. And
I
yeah,
Yeah, the Roman formation, the testudo formation, the turtle formation basically was to keep them from being pelted with arrows and stones. The Greek phalanx, though, didn't form that kind of complete enclosure. Like they had round shields, and they had long spears. I think the main purpose of the Greek phalanx was actually to take out cavalry and as well as chariots. Like you couldn't just ride a horse through the Greek phalanx because the horse is going to get speared multiple times, and the soldiers all have their shields, so it would be tough. Like the Greeks, they made quick work of the Persians. Like we talked about in that other video about the history of chariots, where when the chariots came through, they just kind of let them pass, and then they closed them around, and that was the last time that the Persians ever used chariots again. They're like, nope. But yeah, the main purpose of the phalanx, I'm pretty sure, was to deal with cavalry charges. Of course, charging them as just a foot soldier would be tough too. So you're trying to run up to a huge crowd of men.
yeah. At first, they have spears, and then if you get past the spears, they would have short swords, which I'm guessing the Praetorian Guard had as well.
Yeah, Praetorian Guard. I know the Romans. They eventually abandoned the rectangular shields, and throughout most of their existence, especially the Byzantine period, there was little to no use. Like they were mostly using oval shields by then. And I don't know like all the details as to why they changed tactics. But of course, there were other innovations that would come. And they started wearing more armor, mail armor, stuff like that. And there was heavy cavalry became more of a thing, like heavily armored cavalry. Yeah, I don't feel confident enough to go. I don't know all the details about all that. So, but one thing is for sure, there's definitely a resemblance between the Praetorians and some of the things that are going on now, where you have this kind of unelected body that is made for a specific purpose, but they're deciding, they're deciding who gets to be in charge, regardless of who actually wants it. And they're not necessarily patriots. They're like most of the Roman legions, they were patriots. They were people that were already citizens. If you weren't a citizen, you had to go to the auxiliaries. Whereas the Praetorians, there's definitely a financial, like economic and financial incentives to choose that, and personal more opportunities for personal advancement because you're closer to the emperor. You can either suck up to him. Your chances of sucking up to him as well as killing him are much greater. Like they're much more realistic possibilities. And like a lot of people don't like the Praetorians, and I think that it was great when Constantine disbanded them. And maybe there's something to that. Maybe it's better just to not have these kind of special units that have the power to actually overturn the will of people, whatever that might be. Like maybe
in case with Constantine, I guess they picked the side against God and they lost, and it's kind of what's going on nowadays with some of these three-letter agencies.
I'm still waiting for them to lose, though. But
in the end, they will lose.
Yeah,
it's written in the Bible, and they'll get what's due.
What's coming?
Yeah. But yeah, interesting. And there's like no checks and balances, like because like these agencies, there's no checks, and the Praetorians, there was nobody that kept them in check.
Only a strong emperor could keep them in check.
Yeah.
And it would be like a strong emperor that already has the support of the military. What he could do is just disband the Praetorians, and if they try to argue about it, then he can bring in the regular military. So there were times where the new emperor would come in and he would just replace the Praetorian Guard with like a new guard, but the institution would continue. So
it's also what you see in communism. I think you see with the military in general and these autocratic regimes today, is that the military gets a lot of power. Like in North Korea, for example, like you have the Kims that are ruling the country, but then there's always like the threat of a military insubordination. But of course, you see that in other countries as well. I think it's super interesting, for sure.
Yeah, like Sisi, the current president of Egypt, he was put there by the military. He came from the military, and as long as I think the last election, he actually arrested his political opponents, he had them arrested or sabotaged in some way or another, and then the election was like a totally predetermined outcome where the only person that was even running against him was actually a friend of his, and it was just so that there'd be someone else on the ballot. And that guy actually told everybody, yeah, vote for Sisi, he's the greatest. And the election election turnout was low, but of course, he still won.
Well, that's also where in countries where there's no really individual conviction when it comes to democracy, or when you let people decide, they end up voting totalitarian to some degree. I think Turkey also falls in that category, where they had like after Ataturk, the military was really keeping ruling the country for the longest time, really until Erdogan. He really broke down the military power there. But then he is also like autocratic in many ways, and locking up the press and things like that, and coming up with an ideology that's anti-individual freedom. So yeah, it's interesting. How do you break through that? Is democracy, is that really just something that's actually quite rare in the world? Because you need to have the. I think so too. I think the people need to be aware of it. Like for the Romans and the Greeks, right? They had it to some degree, and then they all lost it. Whether it was due to internal politics or from outside pressure. But yeah, and I think it probably also, just degeneracy in general, where the culture is just falling apart. But yeah, interesting. Yeah, I had to think about when you mentioned the Praetorians and the elite Roman guards. Being Stilgar, I had to immediately think of my arch enemies, the Sardaukar. Um,
Yeah.
you know, if you're aware of the Dune universe, but of course there are many other examples as well. And then also about the if you remember, the Saddam Hussein also had these elite soldiers. Do you remember what they were called?
No, I don't actually.
Yeah, they were. I had to look it up as well. They were called the Republican Guard. I remember during the Gulf War that they were always described as these elite soldiers. And I think actually nowadays Iran also has an elite soldier, a group of elite soldiers as well, that has like special privileges compared to the regular army. So the Praetorian Guard is still very much alive and kicking and doing what it does in many countries. And then, of course, there's also different shades of it with the three-letter agencies and others that are exerting way more power than they probably or than they should.
Well,
So
one of those three-letter agencies did kill a sitting president, like it's confirmed.
yeah, and
And
one of them became president. One of the leaders of one of the three-letter agencies. Um, so I'm thinking about a certain Bush senior. So yeah,
yeah, I
yeah,
wasn't. Yeah, and also like one thing about dictatorships is, and particularly like the Kims and all these other kind of people, Joseph Stalin, you pick them. They can run the country and the regular people into the ground as much as they want. It doesn't matter. There's only one group that they have to have the support from, and that's the military. So they can be
yeah,
as horrible as they want to everybody as long as they got that military. If they lose that military, like if they're not nice to the military, they don't give them the incentives they want, then it's very likely that they could be replaced by somebody from the military. Like the military is the only people that you really have to be nice to if you're a dictator.
yeah. That's interesting because like those are your only constituents. But then
Yep.
if you look at like, would you rather be leading the military or being in a high position in the military in North Korea or be in a high position in the military in South Korea? I wonder which one is better.
You probably get paid more in. So what I would say with that comparison is South Korea, you probably get paid more and you have a more comfortable life. But North Korea, if you're a high-ranking military officer, you can behave more
Yeah, you have
unscrupulously.
way more power, I
Yeah,
guess.
so
The other
if you
one, you
want to
have way
kill
more
someone,
money.
yeah, you
Mm,
could kill and torture people as long as you don't bother the Kim Jongs with it. You can probably have access to whatever woman you want, regardless of whether she wants, snuggle
yeah.
struggle. That's the only that's what I think.
What? Snuggle struggle?
Snuggle struggle, yeah. I'm trying
I
to
never.
avoid that activating the.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because at some point like your constituents are not the people in general, so you can just like be kind of parasitic as an elite guard and run your country into the ground. But
Mhm.
to which extent? I guess in North Korea it goes pretty far. So yeah.
Yeah, North Korea, I mean, there's only one fat person in the whole country, and there's not that much. I mean, I guess there could potentially be somebody else, but I've never seen it. And there's not as much of, you have this power, but there's not as many things to get with it because there's just not as many nice things. And that's because there's no production going on to speak of. So that's the downside. Like you got all this power, but you're ruling over a garbage dump. Same.
Yeah, but if you look at their neighbor China, China, you sorry, I was trying to do a Trump, but
China.
you yeah, exactly. Uh, even there, like the military, the party is extremely powerful. But what you saw with this whole all the measurements they were taking against a certain thing that I won't mention,
Mhm.
they at some point people had also had enough, and they couldn't push it anymore. So even there, you still have some checks and balances. Like people will rise up and but for some reason in North Korea, that's not the case. Yeah.
They don't have enough food to rise up.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, North Korea is kind of
It's an
the most
enigma.
extreme example of
Yeah.
communism I can think of. It's also a godless country. You know, they worship Kim Jong Un, like literally, and they have statues of him.
Well, it's also what they did with the emperors, right? They worshipped them as well back
The
in the
Roman
day.
emperors, not, I mean,
Yeah.
like that, you were expected.
Caesar.
Yeah, I mean, but like the Roman Empire had like much more traditions and culture than North Korea. Like you had all sorts of different religions, mostly polytheistic, and polytheists don't mind occasionally praying to other gods. I don't know how stringently the emperor worship was, enforced. Like, how are they going to know whether you did it or not? The empire is so huge. There's no like electronic surveillance back then. So
Yeah, but still, they managed to feed a bunch of Christians to the lions and burn them
because they
because they.
decided to deliberately target Christians. That was the thing. Like,
Yeah,
I
and they also refused to bow down for the emperor and acknowledge his divine beingness.
yeah, I mean the Roman emperors, not all of them, but some of them definitely saw Christianity as a threat to the state. And I think that took a while to kind of, well, Nero, I think it started with Nero actually. But yeah, in general, yeah, but they also didn't have the capacity to just catch every single person. It's not like what we're headed towards now, where they're gonna, like, they
Oh
didn't
yeah.
have a surveillance state that would automatically know what you did, or a social credit
Well, each
system.
everybody gets a number, and if you don't get the number, you don't get fed. Yeah, it's biblical times for sure, and it wouldn't
Mm,
be possible without the
technology.
technology we have today. Imagine that, people talking about this 2,000 years ago, and now the technology is actually coming. So, yeah,
Yep, it sure is. And it's, yeah, but the technology is coming, but to some extent, like what we're having is just some repeating patterns. Like the
yeah,
it's in the nature of governments to try to consolidate power to themselves, and also the mega rich, like the elites and stuff. They also want to concentrate the power and wealth. And I heard that with most people that they become rich, the riches usually don't survive 1 or 2 generations later. But unless, of course, you establish some kind of system like feudalism where you're rich and then you buy up everything, and then by default you just own everything. So even if you're an inept bumbler and you're doing drugs and all this other stuff, and taking bribes, you still own all the land, and you just have to be nice to the military, and that's it. You're pretty much set. So, and definitely repeating patterns with feudalism.
yeah, and
Communism
also
is pretty
the
much
if
feudalism,
Christianity is still seen as a threat by the communists,
because it
like in
is.
North
Yeah,
Korea, yeah, because yeah, it's
it
an individualistic relation between you and God, and that is seen as a major threat. Whereas with some of the other religions, they feel that they can still control it better because it's more of a group religion. So instead of
Christianity is a threat to the state because we have these ideas that rights come from God, not from laws and not from human decrees. And we have like a moral standard that we can use to hold the state accountable. Even if they have the power, like we still have like the background to say, hey, what you're doing is wrong and here's why. So,
yeah, and we have the conviction of the Holy Spirit. And I
yeah.
think that's a major. Like people get it, and they'll do things that harm themselves, or like in order to save somebody or speak the truth, or because they're convicted by the Holy Spirit, and I think to some extent what work it's also a spiritual battle. It was back then, and it's still today. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
tend to agree. Like the focus on Christianity that's happened like all throughout history with different governments and different time periods, different parts of the world. It's kind of uncanny. Like it's something that I can't just explain by way of physical things. Like I definitely think there's a spiritual component to it. Because those
yeah. I
other
mean, even
religions
even
that
Hitler wanted to get rid of the church, or even like they always
eventually,
say
yeah.
like, well, like, oh, yeah, he was a Christian. It's like, no, he
No,
wasn't.
he
He wanted to
wasn't.
get rid of the church. Marx wanted to get rid of the church. Like
Yep.
like all the modern, it's and as well as the ancients like Nero. It's all anti. There's a spiritual battle going on for sure.
Yeah, like if it
Um,
was just another religion, then why would there be so much concern over it? Like the level of concern and focus is kind of strange to me. It's like it's more than I can just explain
yeah.
by just looking at a surface level take. It's like you see more concern over Christianity than you do over Islam, and Islam has done a lot of stuff in the world, but that you don't see the same level of concern and focus
No,
of.
because you can go along with it and kind of play the game and follow certain rituals, and then you're fine for the
Mhm.
most part. I think with Christianity, it doesn't work that way. They think they can control Islam. I don't think they can,
No,
but
yeah,
they know that they know for sure they cannot control Christianity. So that's why they're doing everything they can to try and destroy it.
wipe it out. Yeah,
Yeah.
Islam's actually got a protected status, and they call you it.
I wonder
Not,
for how much longer. We'll see how that goes. We'll see
yeah,
how that
there's
goes.
there's something interesting that happened in Saudi Arabia. You know that city, that big gulag they want to build called Neom that's supposed to stretch across the desert. Like the
Yeah,
the
I've heard about
the
it.
the Saud family wants to build Neom. Like they're big members of the starts with a W,
Yeah.
and like all these globalists, they're like, oh, Neom is so cool, it's the way of the future, and all this kind of garbage. Well, apparently they killed like two or three local citizens, like tribes, indigenous tribes to that area, who refused to move. They didn't want to move to make way for Neom. So the government is in the news. The government has sentenced them to death for treason. So we'll have to see, how I
I don't
think
think
that.
they care about that. I don't think they care about that at all.
What? Who doesn't care?
The
Like,
the people that start with a W,
no, they don't care at all.
they don't care. They
They
also
want
don't
to
care about
crush
the
anybody.
Uyghur, the minority Muslim minority in China either, because they're in the way. So you don't hear them in the news because
But
it's not politically opportune. So
it's like what you're saying about playing along with it is I don't think that the Saud family and a lot of the other Middle Eastern dictators, I don't think they really believe in Islam. My
well,
theory
just I
about.
think just like our most of our people that claim to be Christian, our leaders, a lot of them aren't either.
No, yeah, they're not. They just say they are because they want our votes, right?
Yeah.
But most of the ruling class people, I think for most of history and most
Do
of
you
the
think
world.
King Charles, the ruling king of the Anglican Church, do we really think he's a Christian?
Oh, obviously not.
And same for the Dutch king. He's the head of the Dutch church. So is he a Christian?
Nope, probably not.
No.
I didn't know there
So
was a
I
Dutch
mean,
church.
it's a Dutch Reformed church. So
It's a state organization.
it used to be. We used to be officially Dutch Reformed. I don't know if we are anymore. When you're doing your topic around the pilgrims, it would be interesting because they were actually living here before, when they fled England, and they were
Yeah.
free to practice their religion as they saw fit. But they still decided to leave. Of
Yeah,
course,
they
they were
left.
living they were living in Leiden, which was extremely poor at the time. So maybe that didn't help. But
I believe the reason they actually left was because their kids were assimilating to the Dutch culture and they still wanted to be English and speak English, so they just decided to shove off. I don't think they had any actual complaints against Netherlands or Dutch people. They just wanted to remain English, but
But interesting topic. I think we rambled for quite a bit.
Yep.
Anyway, so the Sardaukar.
Sardaukar. And also, when I was looking up, one thing that kind of annoyed me, when I was looking up images of the Praetorian Guards, most of what came up was images from Star Wars in the image search, and I had to actually qualify it by saying like Roman Praetorian Guard, and like that kind of stuff actually makes me feel sad, like that this kind of thing
that we have
first.
to learn or get our history through some kind of bullshit Disney fantasy.
It was like, why is this coming up first? There's only two reasons it would come up first. One is if the people programming the search engine program it to do that, and the other reason is if that just happens to be what most people search for, so I get fed it.
It's probably the latter, I'm afraid, and it's sad. And I think that's part of the reason we started this channel, is because the actual history is so much more interesting than this crappy Disney version of it. So it's so much more meaningful. But the guys in the plastic
like some red plastic helmets and capes and
they can't shoot worth anything. Anyway.
I think the Star Wars Praetorian Guard is also supposed to protect the Emperor, but I don't know. I think there's like a lot less of them there. I never really got into Star Wars.
Me neither. I think Star Wars is fantasy dressed up as sci-fi. Sorry, I mean, no offense to it. I mean, it's just entertainment, so I'm not going to be. In the end, it's just entertainment, like anything else. But I'm more of a sci-fi kind of guy versus fantasy, so that's why.
Yeah, it is fantasy, and it's also, not only is it fantasy, but it's fantasy that falls short of becoming mythology. So I just take it as movies.
Yeah,
I don't care.
The original movies were pretty entertaining. I enjoyed them. So
same. But I also enjoyed
what it's gone into now is just woke garbage. But
everything is that way now.
Yeah.
But anyway, we better close off. I think we've probably gone way too long and off to the side. So I'll go ahead and close us off. Thanks for listening. If you listened to this point, especially, congratulations.
Leave a comment if you want more or less rambling. And if you can like, share, and subscribe. Appreciate it.
Deus homo factus est natura mirante, unus renovatus est a Christo regnante. Gaudete, Christus est natus, ex Maria Virgine, gaudete.